They dumped dirt on my land like it was nothing, like I wouldn't notice, like I wouldn't do anything about it. What they didn't realize is, I'm the kind of person who reads the fine print and remembers it. And by the time they figured that out, their entire project was already grinding to a halt. So here's how it started. I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside a mid-sized town. Nothing fancy, just one of those places where people mow their lawns on Saturdays, wave at each other without really knowing names, and generally keep to themselves. My place backs up against what used to be this wide, open lot. For years it was just grass, weeds, a couple of scraggly trees that looked like they'd given up trying. Kids would sometimes cut across it as a shortcut, and in the fall it turned into this golden patch of tall dry grass that honestly looked kind of peaceful in the late afternoon light. I liked it that way. It felt like space, like breathing room. Then one day a sign went up. Future site of Maple Ridge Townhomes. I remember standing there at the edge of my yard, coffee in hand, just staring at it. Not surprised exactly. Nothing stays empty forever, but still, it felt like the beginning of something I wasn't going to enjoy. Within a couple weeks, the machines showed up. Big ones. Bulldozers, excavators, dump trucks rumbling in before sunrise, backing up with that sharp beeping sound that somehow cuts straight through walls and into your skull. The ground that had been quiet for years turned into this constant churn of noise and motion. Dirt being scraped, hauled, dropped, reshaped. It was like watching the land get rewritten in real time. At first, I tried to be reasonable about it. Construction happens. People need places to live. I told myself it was temporary, just part of living near a growing town. I even chatted with one of the guys early on, young kid, maybe mid-20s, said they were putting up about a dozen units, modern style, quick turnaround. Should be done in 6-7 months, he said, wiping sweat off his forehead. You won't even remember we were here. I remember thinking, yeah, we'll see about that. The first sign something was off came on a Thursday afternoon. I got home from work, walked around back like I usually do, and noticed this small pile of dirt near the far corner of my yard. Not huge, maybe waist high, but definitely new. Fresh soil, darker than the stuff in my yard, still loose, like it had just been dumped. I stood there for a minute, trying to place it. At first, I figured maybe they were staging materials. You know, temporarily setting stuff down while they figured out where it needed to go. It was close to the property line, or what I thought was the property line, so I gave them the benefit of the doubt. No point starting a fight over something that might be gone the next day. Except it wasn't. The next morning, there was more. And the morning after that, even more. By Monday, it wasn't a pile anymore. It was a mound, taller than my fence, stretching wider across the corner of my yard, like it was slowly claiming the space. Every day, I'd hear the trucks pull in, engines idling, then that heavy, hollow sound of soil pouring out the back. Dump after dump after dump. And every time, it landed on my side. That's when I started paying closer attention. I'd stand at the kitchen window in the mornings, coffee in hand again, watching the trucks line up. One of them would back up, slow, deliberate, tilt the bed, and just unload. No hesitation. No checking. No asking. Like it was theirs. Like my yard was just overflow. By midweek, I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I walked over. The site was busy, guys moving around, machines running, dust hanging in the air like a thin fog. I spotted the supervisor pretty quickly. Older guy, late 40s maybe, wearing a clean hard hat, not doing much physical work, just pointing and talking into a radio. He looked like the kind of guy who'd already decided how every conversation was going to go before it even started. Hey, I called out, stepping closer but keeping my distance from the equipment. You got a minute? He glanced at me, quick scan, probably sizing me up. Homeowner, not a threat. Yeah, what's up? I pointed back toward my yard. That dirt pile, that's on my property. He followed my gesture, squinted a little, then shrugged. We're just staging excess soil. Temporary. Temporary's fine, I said, keeping my tone even. But it's not on your land. He shifted his weight, gave me this half smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Property line somewhere around there. We're not crossing anything that matters. Something about the way he said that, casual, dismissive, just sat wrong with me. Somewhere around there isn't really how property lines work, I said. He chuckled, like I'd made a joke. Look, it'll be gone soon. No harm done. And just like that, he turned away. Conversation over. I stood there for a second, watching him walk off, feeling that slow burn in my chest, the kind that doesn't explode right away, just builds steady, quiet, deliberate. Because here's the thing, I don't like being ignored. And I definitely don't like being told that something on my property doesn't matter. That night, I went digging through my files. Took me a while, but I found the survey from when I bought the house. Folded, slightly yellowed at the edges, but still clear. I spread it out on the kitchen table, traced the lines with my finger, double-checking the measurements, the markers, the angles. Then I grabbed a flashlight and went outside. It was quiet again. The machine's gone, the dust settled. Just me, the cool night air, and that massive pile of dirt sitting where it didn't belong. I paced it out, measured from the fence, from the corner post, from the old oak tree near the edge. And there it was, clear as day. The property line ran several feet away from that mound, which meant at least half of it, maybe more, was sitting entirely on my land. Not somewhere around there. Not a gray area. Mine. I stood there in the dark for a while, just looking at it. And that's when the shift happened. Because up until that point, I'd been patient, understanding, willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But now it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. And if they were choosing to ignore my boundary, then I was going to choose how this played out next. The next morning, I made my first move. And it was a quiet one. But it was the beginning of everything. The next morning, I didn't go over there yelling, didn't call a lawyer, didn't even knock on anyone's door. Instead, I grabbed a handful of small survey flags, the kind you can pick up at any hardware store, bright orange, impossible to miss, and I walked straight out to the back corner of my yard. The air still had that early chill to it, dew sitting on the grass, and for a moment everything felt calm again, like the construction chaos hadn't started yet. But then I looked up at that mound of dirt, looming, out of place, and I remembered exactly why I was out there. I pulled the survey map from my back pocket, double-checked my bearings, then started placing the flags one by one, straight through the middle of the pile. Each flag marked the exact property line. No guessing, no somewhere around there. Just a clean, legal boundary cutting right across the dirt they'd been dumping all week. By the time I was done, a bright orange line ran across that mound like a warning sign. Subtle, but very clear. Then I stepped back, took a breath, and went inside like nothing happened. Around mid-morning, I heard the trucks again. Same routine. Engines rumbling, gears grinding, that sharp reverse beep echoing across the yard. I made myself a cup of coffee and stood at the window, watching. One of the drivers backed up toward the pile, paused for a second, just long enough to notice the flags, and I thought, okay, maybe this is where it stops. Maybe someone walks over, asks a question, figures it out. But no. The truck tilted, the bed lifted, and another load of dirt came pouring down, right over the flags, burying half of them instantly. I remember just staring at that, coffee halfway to my mouth, thinking, really? That's the move you're going with? That's when I started documenting everything. I grabbed my phone, stepped outside, and took pictures. Not just one or two, everything. The trucks, the license plates, the drivers, the way the dirt was being dumped, the flags disappearing under each new load. I started keeping track of the time, the frequency, how many trucks came through in a day. It became almost routine. Wake up, check the yard, document the damage. And the crazy part? They didn't even try to hide it. No hesitation, no adjustment. It was like I didn't exist, like the line I'd drawn meant absolutely nothing. A couple days later, I ran into my neighbor, Carla, while grabbing the mail. She lives 2 houses down, retired schoolteacher, the kind of person who notices everything before anyone else does. She gave me that look. You know the one, half curious, half concerned. Tom, she said, nodding toward my backyard. You planning to build a mountain back there, or what? I laughed, but it came out dry. Not exactly my idea. She stepped a little closer, lowered her voice. I saw those trucks. They've been at it all week. That on your property? Yeah, I said. At least half of it. Her eyebrows went up. And they're just doing that. Pretty much. She shook her head slowly. That doesn't sound right. No, I said. It doesn't. That conversation stuck with me more than I expected. Not because it told me anything new, but because it confirmed something. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't just me being territorial or difficult. It was wrong. Plain and simple. So later that afternoon, instead of going back to the site, I drove into town. There's a small municipal building near the center. Nothing impressive, just a brick structure with a faded sign out front that says Planning and AMP Development. I'd never had a reason to go in before, but that day, I walked straight up to the counter and told the woman there I wanted to review the construction permits for the Maple Ridge project. She didn't ask many questions, just had me sign a form and pointed me toward a side room with a stack of files. "Take your time," she said. "Just bring it back when you're done." So I sat down, flipped through the documents, and started reading. Most of it was what you'd expect: site plans, zoning approvals, timelines, nothing too surprising. But then I hit a section labeled Soil Management Plan, and something about that title made me slow down. I read it once, then again, more carefully. It outlined exactly how excavated soil was supposed to be handled, where it could be stored, how long it could remain on site, and most importantly, where it absolutely could not go. There were clear requirements. All excess soil had to be transported to an approved disposal facility. No off-site dumping without authorization. No storing large quantities without proper erosion control measures like silt fences or barriers. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the page, feeling that quiet shift again. The same one from the night before, but stronger this time. Because now I had something they didn't think I would. Proof. Not just that they were on my property, but that what they were doing violated their own permit. And not in some minor, technical way either. This was the kind of thing cities take seriously: erosion, runoff, environmental impact. That pile in my yard. One good rainstorm and half of it could wash straight into the storm drains down the street. Which meant this wasn't just about me anymore. It was bigger than that. I closed the file, walked back to the counter, and asked if someone wanted to report a violation on an active construction site. How would they do that? The woman looked up at me, studied my face for a second, then reached under the desk and handed me a form. "Fill this out," she said. "Include as much detail as you can. Photos help." I gave a small nod. "I've got plenty of those." That night, I sat at my kitchen table again. Same spot as the survey map, but this time surrounded by printed photos, notes, timestamps. I filled out the complaint carefully, making sure everything was clear, factual, and impossible to dismiss. No tie-in, no exaggeration, just evidence. When I finished, I looked at the stack in front of me and thought, this is either going to fix the problem or make it a whole lot worse. The next morning, I turned it in. And then, I waited. 3 days. That's how long it took. On the third morning, just as the usual lineup of trucks started rolling in, 2 white city vehicles pulled up to the site. No sirens, no flashing lights, just quiet, official presence. I watched from my window as 2 inspectors stepped out, clipboards in hand, vests on, expressions neutral. Everything slowed down after that. One of them walked straight toward the dirt pile. The other started talking to the supervisor, the same guy I'd spoken to earlier in the week. Even from a distance, I could tell the tone was different this time. Less casual, more controlled. I stepped outside, not getting too close, just enough to hear pieces of the conversation. "Property line runs here," one of the inspectors asked, pointing toward the flags, some still visible, others half buried. "That's what he claims," the supervisor said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. The inspector didn't respond right away. Instead, he pulled out a measuring tool, walked the line, checked the distances against something on his clipboard. The second inspector joined him, and the 2 of them exchanged a look. Not a good one. Then they moved around the pile, examining the slope, the lack of any barriers, the way the dirt was just sitting there, exposed. One of them shook his head slightly. "No erosion control," he muttered. The supervisor's posture changed, subtle but noticeable. Shoulders tighter, arms crossed. "It's temporary," he said again, like that was going to fix everything. The inspector looked at him, calm but firm. "That doesn't make it compliant." There was a pause, and in that pause, you could feel it. The shift. The moment where things stop being informal and start becoming official. One of the inspectors reached into his folder, pulled out a form, and began writing. I didn't hear every word after that, but I didn't need to, because about 10 minutes later, the engines started shutting off. One by one, the trucks stopped moving. The machines went quiet. The constant noise that had filled the air for weeks just disappeared. And in its place, silence. Heavy, sudden, almost unreal. I stood there in my backyard, looking at that now motionless site, the pile of dirt still sitting across my property line. But suddenly, For the first time since this started, it felt like it didn't belong there anymore. Not just physically, but legally. And that's when I realized something. They hadn't just dumped their problem on my land. They'd handed me the leverage to stop everything. That silence didn't last long, but it lasted just long enough to make a point. For the first time since those machines showed up, there was no movement, no engines, no dust drifting across the fence line. Just a stalled construction site sitting there like someone had hit pause on the whole operation. And I won't lie, I stood there a little longer than I needed to, just taking it in. Not because I was trying to gloat, at least that's what I told myself, but because it felt like something had finally shifted back into place. Like the ground, in a way, had settled again, even if it was temporary. That evening, just as the sun was starting to dip and the light turned that soft orange color that makes everything look calmer than it really is, I heard a knock at my front door. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Same guy, the supervisor. Up close, he looked different than he had on site. Less in control. The confidence was still there, but it had cracks in it now. Small ones, but noticeable. His hard hat was gone, replaced with a baseball cap, and for the first time, he wasn't surrounded by noise and movement. Just standing there on my porch. Evening, he said. I nodded. Evening. There was a pause. Not awkward exactly, but measured. Like both of us knew this conversation mattered more than the first one. Look, he started, exhaling through his nose. About the dirt, we didn't realize it was that far over the line. I didn't say anything right away. Just let him keep going. It was meant to be temporary, he added. We've got trucks scheduled to move it out anyway. No need for things to get official like this. There it was again. That word. Temporary. I leaned lightly against the doorframe. You saw the flags. He hesitated. Just for a second. Yeah. And you kept dumping. Another pause. Shorter this time. We're on a tight schedule. I almost laughed at that, but not in a friendly way. So that makes it my problem? His jaw tightened slightly. I'm saying we can fix it. We'll have it cleared out in a couple days. I looked past him for a moment, toward the site. Still quiet. Still frozen. Cleared out, I repeated. That's it. He frowned a little. What do you mean? I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. I mean, you've had trucks dumping thousands of pounds of soil onto my yard for over a week. That ground's compacted now. The grass underneath? Dead. You don't just clear it out and call it even. He shifted his weight again, clearly not liking where this was going. So what are you asking for? And that was the moment. The one where I could have kept it simple. Could have said, just remove the dirt, and we're done. But I thought about those mornings, standing at the window, watching them ignore every signal I gave. I thought about the way he said somewhere around there, like my property line was just a suggestion. So I answered him plainly. I want it restored, I said. All of it. Dirt removed, ground leveled, fresh topsoil brought in, and new grass planted. Exactly how it was before you touched it. He blinked, processing. That's a lot. I shrugged slightly. So was the pile. Another pause. Longer this time. You could almost hear the math running in his head. The cost, the delay, the paperwork, the pressure coming down from whoever was above him. Look, he said finally, lowering his voice a bit. If we do all that, you'll drop the complaint? I held his gaze. I don't control the city. Which was true, but we both knew what I meant. He glanced back toward the site again, then back at me. The silence stretched just enough to make it uncomfortable. All right, he said eventually. We'll take care of it. No handshake. No smile. Just an agreement, built on necessity. 3 days later, the trucks came back. But this time, everything was different. No line of vehicles waiting to dump. No rush. No noise stacked on top of itself. Instead, it was slower, more deliberate. One truck at a time, pulling up, loading the soil back in, hauling it away. The same dirt that had been dropped carelessly was now being handled like it mattered. Load after load, the mound started shrinking. I watched most of it from the yard, sometimes from the window, sometimes just standing out there with my hands in my pockets. No one avoided me now. No one brushed me off. A couple of the drivers even nodded as they worked, like there was this unspoken understanding now. The boundary had been reestablished. By the end of the second day, the pile was gone. Not reduced. Gone. All that was left was a rough patch of compacted earth, flat, dull, lifeless compared to the rest of the yard. But even that didn't last long. The following morning, a different crew showed up. Smaller trucks, lighter equipment. They loosened the soil, turned it over, brought in fresh topsoil, dark, rich, nothing like the construction fill that had been sitting there before. Then came the final step. Grass seed. They spread it evenly, watered it down, and covered parts of it with that thin layer of straw to help it take. It didn't look like much at first, just dirt and hope, really. But over the next couple weeks, green started pushing through again. Slowly, steadily, like the yard was reclaiming itself. Sometime after that, the city inspectors came back. Same white vehicles, same calm demeanor. But this time, the energy was different. They walked the area, checked the measurements again, looked at the restored ground, made a few notes, and then, just like that, they cleared the stop work order. And the machines came back to life. The project resumed, right where it had been forced to stop. Except now, there was a difference. Along the edge of the property line, exactly where my flags had been, they installed a low retaining barrier. Nothing dramatic, just a solid, intentional divider. A line that said, without saying anything, this is where it ends. No more somewhere around there. No more guessing. Months passed. The townhomes went up, one by one, clean and modern, just like that kid had promised early on. New people started moving in, cars in the driveways, lights in the windows. From the street, everything looked normal, like it had always been that way. And my backyard? It looked exactly like it did before. Same stretch of grass, same quiet corner, same feeling of space. Except now, I saw it differently, because it wasn't just yard anymore. It was a line that had been tested and held. And every now and then, when I'd step outside in the evening, I'd catch myself glancing over at that retaining barrier. Not because I was worried, but because it reminded me of something simple. Sometimes people don't respect boundaries until there's a consequence attached to them. And sometimes, that consequence costs them more than they ever expected. They thought they were just dumping dirt. But what they really did was bury their own schedule. And here's the part one still think about. If I hadn't checked that survey, if I'd just let it go, if I believed that temporary meant harmless, would they have ever stopped? Or would that line have kept moving inch by inch until it didn't exist at all? I don't know, but I do know this. Most conflicts like this don't start big. They start small, quiet, easy to ignore. And what you do in that moment, that's what decides how big it becomes. So I'm curious, what would you have done? Would you have let it slide, kept the peace, trusted their word? Or would you have done exactly what I did and pushed back, even if it meant shutting everything down? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think. And if you enjoy stories like this, where small lines turn into big consequences, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's had to draw a line of their own.